Hey everyone, welcome to Reiki Radio. I am here today with the beautiful alchemist named Padma. Padma, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's such a pleasure, and it's a dream, and I think one of the brightest in my in consciously creating this. And I've been thinking about it for a while, and somewhere I knew that I would meet you, in this space. um, I assumed that I would be interviewing you, but you know how it happens. It's that illusion of separatedness that dissolves. So it's just a conversation, but I just cannot tell you how happy I am to be here. So grateful. Thank you so much.
Oh, honey, I am so grateful and so thankful to have met you, to exchange so much with you over this last year or two. And you never know, one day you could be interviewing me. Can't wait for that.
Good goal to have, actually.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, I would love it. So I have so many things to talk about with you. I have had the pleasure of being able to interview several of the people within the alchemy circle. And so in this, I've learned a lot about you all's backgrounds that I didn't know before. So before we kind of dive too deep into everything, I just want to start out by asking about your journey with Reiki. And even I was surprised to know that it was something that you were in connection with within your family, even, to start. So could you tell us a little bit about your background in connection to spirituality and where Reiki came in?
Yeah. Yeah. It was actually it has been a part of life, and it just seemed like everyday life. I culturally come from India, from we are culturally Hindus, so yoga, Ayurveda, and all those other practices which are sister sciences. They've been a part of life, but we never kind of knew it as a spiritual practice to learn from, because it was everyday life, right? I mean, we still cook food which is which follows certain spices which are good for the doshas, understanding all that aspects of Ayurveda. But when it came to yoga, my paternal grandfather was practiced yoga every day, and in summer holidays we used to go back to go and see them, and then I used to see him doing those very difficult asanas. And my own grandmother was a Reiki practitioner. At that time, I would, just see her practice Reiki every night before she slept. I I don't think I ever sat with her to understand. I knew it was Reiki. I knew that she was doing a practice which was self healing, and she would later in the morning tell me that when I do this I feel very relaxed. I don't need to take those pills which they do, right, those sleeping pills where as you grow older people tend to take those. And she says it used to bring her into a state of calmness. So that was, I think, in a way, an introduction to the spiritual practices which were a part of life. I didn't really pursue them seriously until, I think of course, I began to do yoga because, seeing it in the family, I used to, I think right from in my 20s, I've been doing yoga, understanding breathing, awareness, connection to the breath. So that was a very normal life for us. Never did I pause and say, okay, I need to, someday go deeper into it to understand, okay, we come from a certain tradition, there are some lessons to be learned. Um, Perhaps I had that feeling in me. Sometimes they don't come to the forefront unless something happens. And that something was back then when I was studying. I remember His Holiness Dalai Lama was, he was preaching in our university, and we attended his discourse, and it was pretty exciting. And I was very happy because I felt I met a spiritual leader, right? I mean, it was a moment. It was a very important moment in life. For some reason, he, amongst the thousands of people, and we were standing out there just to have a glimpse of him, up close. I saw him walk by. For some reason, he turned back. He came back to me. I was like, gosh, what's happening, right? But I was just staring at him, and he held my hand and he looked into my eyes. I can't tell you what it was. It was just so profound. It still stays with me that he just nodded his head and he went away. And when I look back, there was a connection there, because a week after that, a friend of mine approached me and he said, "There's a energy healing workshop which is going on very close home. Would you like to attend?" I was like, energy healing? Okay. I mean, I didn't know that yoga and all these were a part of energy healing practice. I said, yeah, sure, because I was somewhere inclined. So I did go, and this is also another type of energy healing called pranic healing. Prana is the life force energy, very similar to Reiki, and it also finds its roots in Japan. So I attended that course, got attuned. I did use it for a long time, with friends and family, asking them, okay, do you have any pain? Can I come and help you? Is your tooth aching? All that kind of. So I continued in a way, but I think it was not until and then life went on. I went back into corporate India. I was in human resources for a long time. So understanding people, being connected to them was something I think I had naturally, because I know that people used to seek me out and, want to talk to me about their lives. So, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed connecting with people there. Uh, it was in when I moved to the US a few years back. There was a time, I think it was just before the pandemic, and I remember for 1 week I had my grandmother constantly coming into my dreams. It was insane, and she would keep talking about Reiki. It was like she was whispering. Imagine, it took me 1 week to realize that there is a spirit guide coming and giving you a message on something, and you need to maybe wake up to it, because there will be signals, there will be messages that will come. So that's when I actually found a teacher here, and I did all the three levels, and I got attuned. But I didn't know that this was the path I wanted to take. I began to do the self healing, and I found it very helpful in my own journey, because and then I wanted to know more about it. I wanted to understand the traditional system of Japanese Reiki. I wanted to dig deeper into it, and that's when I found Reiki Radio. Thank you for that. And and I heard so many of your podcasts while cooking. I would hear, and I would, I mindfully listening to it. It helped me in understanding, especially the history. It's very important to understanding the precepts. The way you have explained has been life changing as far as I'm concerned.
So there's so many things, Padma. This is amazing. I'm like, okay, I gotta put it in order. First, I want to say I also had an opportunity one time to hear the Dalai Lama speak. And what really struck me about hearing him speak was how funny he was. And the reason it struck me is because I think back then, a lot of spiritual teachers or leaders that I had come across all seemed so serious in nature. And then here you have the Dalai Lama, who was very funny, very funny, very just seemed like such a kind heart. Like this energy around him was amazing. So yeah, I can relate to that. But okay, so going back to in your family, you were practicing yoga and you were connected to Ayurveda and all of these systems, and even went on to study pranic healing. And I have to ask, so back then when you were practicing, was it just because it was, like you say, it was just a part of life? Or was it something that was connected to back then, like your emotional well-being? Like, did you make any connection to like the why you were doing these practices, or how they were supporting you in your life in any way?
There was a time, and I did feel that I needed it. There was this, I think, lack of harmony, for a better word, which I I I was looking for it, in the sense that I knew that there was something that I needed to seek within myself to change many aspects of life. And but but life was going on. It just went on, and I don't think I really paused and said, okay, what is it that, although there was this lingering knock which used to happen, but I wasn't aware of what I wasn't aware of the messages it was giving me. But so it was eventually, I wanted life to happen through me, not just pass by. And that's when I paused and I said, and it was also, I think, you often speak about the dark night of the soul. You speak about when a certain trauma happens, and then sometimes you wake up, right? There's a turmoil and you need to transform yourself. Uh, so at that time when I was back in India, for me, it was the beginning of understanding an energy system, maybe more in a theoretical sense. But when I came here and I again got the same message about energy healing, that was when I knew that I was at least able to connect those two together. And I said, okay, here is a spiritual path. And I knew that I wanted to take one, because the harmony of the mind and body is very essential. And I don't think I gave myself that much of I think I needed to understand a lot about myself. And there were a lot of physical aspects also, a lot of ailments which manifest as physical, the energy blocks, that become dis-ease, right? So that was also happening. And so to an extent, it was something which I knew I wanted to do, but it was also a hard knock on my head that, what, this is the time for you. I think pandemic, in a way, when we were asked to go inside, was a good opportunity to literally go inside like the hermit, shine that light within you. So that gave me a lot of, I think, opportunity to connect with the alchemy circle, being able to share ideas and actually learn a lot. So to have those live sessions and to hear the real time examples of what's happening is the best way to understand the an energy system, an energy healing system.
Yeah. And it's really cool to think. I mean, like, here you have this as, part of your life, and but you still went through this process of like, well, how do I understand it in a different way? And whether you were consciously aware that you were trying to do that or not, it's interesting how things can be presented to us, but we also always have an opportunity to go deeper. Just like Reiki class, you could go to Reiki class and that be the end, or you can go deeper with whatever it is that you were taught to practice and, see how it applies. So I have to ask you about that, because you did the pranic healing, and then you were wanting to help anyone that had any physical ailments, these types of things. And then you yourself were dealing with some chronic pain. And so very cool that your grandma came into your dreams and kind of like inspired you to reconnect to some form of energy healing. So when you got to that point, was it just this relationship between you and the physical pain? And then were you trying to just work through the layers of that, or what really revealed itself to you once you started implementing Reiki into your practice?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I have answered it in several ways, and there are transformative answers that come out of it. So I think there are a lot of dimensions to that. The simplest answer to that would be that beginning to do an energy healing, a practice such as Reiki, it changed my relationship with self. And that's the simple answer. And hence it changed my relationship with the world, right? The worldview changed. Now, if you ask me, yes, it did come as I did know that when one has a physical ailment, and it's very easy to go to a doctor, right? And you get medicines or you can take painkillers. But when it is consistent, it is chronic, then there is definitely an emotional block there. And I was going through certain energy, I think emotional blocks, which I was refusing to release at that point of time. I didn't know how to do it. I did not have the tools to release them. How does that one, I know that now. I know about meditations, but that was a time when I didn't. So I went seeking, because I knew that there has to be answers, right? Yoga comes with meditation. There is breath work there. All those kind of help to an extent, but you have to make them a part of your life as a practice. It has to be that ritual, So, so when I realized that I cannot stop working, I need to work, but at the same time, I need to understand how these blocks are manifesting and why they are doing it. So I realized that that would mean that I need to ask some hard questions to self. And Reiki does that, right? Reiki, although there is the precepts one works with every day, but then there is that shadow work which you do, and how many of us really want to do that, right? Let those be hidden there. It's okay, we can still convince ourselves to another reality and move on. But end of the day, that doesn't help you. You need to dig deep, you need to find those shadows, you need to throw light into them. And Reiki was a practice which began as a self-healing practice, but as I went deeper into it with you, with your classes, with the group, I realized there are so many layers to it. There is a whole world out there, that glorious rabbit hole there of. But my most favorite is the way I divide my, how the practice is practicing the practice, as you. So that is very important to me, and that is what kind of, I think, brings me into a certain amount of balance every day. So without that, I don't think today I can really feel very grounded or centered.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask you this too, because you're sharing so much, and I want to make sure, especially people who may be newer to the practice or just curious about the different dimensions of how we can work with energy and what it's really about. So you had this experience of being able to help people with their physical pain. You were also dealing with some physical pain, but in the working on yourself energetically, you then started to realize there was more layers to why the chronic pain was there, and the energy blocks that were created, the maybe different stories and emotions that you weren't maybe looking at consciously before. So all of this starts to come into your awareness. And then, were you working by yourself on this? What was the process for you? Was it uncomfortable? Were you just eager to do it because you wanted to heal? What was your relationship to starting to see yourself in a different way?
So basically, as a personality, I like gathering information. I first like understanding the concept of anything.
Mhm.
So when I began to learn Reiki for the first few months, I would just read every book I found on Reiki, right, to understand various viewpoints on Reiki. But at the same time, it was just very limited to me. Maybe you could call it a lack of confidence, that I wanted to use it on someone else, or be there and say, okay, I'm here, I'm a Reiki healer. I didn't think I was there yet, because I knew that there was something deeper here, because every time I dug deep, I was like, really, this is also an aspect of Reiki. Reiki is just not hands-on healing. It goes beyond that. And Mika Usui did start this, right? Reiki, when he introduced it, he did want it to be a spiritual path. So there was that in that. There was a spiritual path involved. So initially, to answer your question, yes, I did find a lot of peace and calm. I did see my pains going away. But it was just not that self-healing. It was when to be honestly able to chant the Gokai, the 5 precepts, but actually to live the Gokai are two different stories.
Yes.
So, and I do remember the first few classes with you were about that, just for today, right? I'm like, wow, that statement by itself can have so many stories in that, right? Just for this moment only. Um, I had the most difficult time dealing with the first 2 precepts of anger and worry, because I think I carry them. And I don't carry anger per se, but there are frustrations. And those are mostly towards me, not the world, which is also not a good idea, because everything starts with self, right? So yes, so yeah, it was that. It was, I understood the levels of and the layers that were in it, right from the meditation, right from mindfulness to the precepts, to the and I do, like I mentioned, I enjoy working with Reiki, with the traditional Japanese techniques and traditions. And I'll tell you why. Because that was when I began to actually, when they speak about the Kenyuko and Joshin Kokyuho, they actually talk about releasing cards. It is just not, dry bathing has got so much stories in into it. And to be able to do that every day, in the morning and in the night when you finish your day, has such an effect on you. You are releasing cards, you're sending them for healing to the people to whom they should go. And the basic, the basic rationale behind that is that don't have people in your thoughts when you're sleeping, have yourself, right? Release them, let them be in their space.
Yeah.
So for me, when I learned Reiki, it was just like a study material, right? I'm studying. But when I dug deep is when I understood the various dimensions that it can involve. Coming into your space, being able to breathe into the dantian, the lower dantian, is such it seems so simple. It is so beautiful. It can just center one so easily, right? To start any Reiki session, whether it is for a client or for self, to be able to sit in that space of stillness and, and be able to breathe into that space of your soul, just sets the theme for that session. So all these were the nuggets which I began to discover with you, with the team, myself, reading books. So there is a world out there. I still feel I've just scratched the surface, but I absolutely love what I am learning from there.
No, and you always explain it so beautifully, Padma. I love even in the alchemy circle when you share like your insights that come through. They really point to a lot of your insightfulness and mindfulness. And you remind me of that when you mentioned the Gokai. I mean, you said something very striking. It is very different to just chant the Reiki principles versus how do we then begin to live them, right? And even that aspect you said of breathing into the lower dantian, it reminds me of how that can really support us into that presence of just for today, just this moment. And again, while these practices may seem so simple, they are really, really life-changing. So I have to go back a little bit to the Gokai, and even you talking about like Kinyoku-ho and Joshin Koki-ho, the mindfulness within these different techniques that we do. Because again, we can learn anything and just kind of go through the motions or be stuck on the technical aspects. But when we come into relationship with these practices, as we're coming into relationship with us, it totally changes the experience of what these practices are, right? So with the being free from anger, being free from worry, which, I think a lot of us are like, what, how on earth do you do that? Right? Like with the Reiki principles, like, it sounds good, but how do I do it? So I have to ask you just even that at base level with the Gokai, because there will be a lot of people listening who have maybe not yet considered how to actually live this or how to work with it. What do you recommend, or how did that work for you with, okay, so being free with anger, now what? How did that work into your practice, and how do you work with it even now?
So it's a practice, yes. I do chant, and I find it very important to also chant them in the original text, in the Japanese. So I begin by chanting them, but it goes beyond that, right? Once you do the chanting, and which is a practice, which could be a checklist in doing a self Reiki practice, and then you begin to meditate, and you have to sit with that emotion. You have to sit, and this is where a little bit of shadow work also comes. Just for today, I'm free from anger. So are you really free is a question, because as humans are we, and a lot of uncomfortable emotions come out of it. So the way I do it is I do a lot of journaling. I have a lot of prompts for myself. I also go beyond that, because I go and speak to my family about it, and I say, okay, I know that I have this. I have a certain maybe aspect of anger, which is short-temperedness, and I know that I have it. So how is it that I have to sit and see, when does that trigger me, on about whom does it trigger me? It's a question to self. It's also the question to others. And then the journaling aspect of it really helps it. And you have to be so aware. You have to be consciously aware of every moment in your life on an everyday basis, to understand, when does this happen and where does it come from? And when we again later talk about the chakras, where is it that you see it, right? In which aspect? For me, most of the time, this is because I have done a lot of work on myself. I see it in my throat. The anger stays there because as I grew up, I always would stop myself from expressing myself. And then I would sit and seriously feel bad. Okay, why am I not able to? Why don't I have the courage to express? So for me, my throat chakra has been the one that has, I think held a lot of anger in wanting to express myself. Maybe now people would find it hard to believe because I do, I do love talking, depends on who I'm with, but this expression of self and honestly expressing yourself, but with compassion, by the way. I can obviously spew a lot of, if I want to, which I don't, and that's the easiest thing to do, as opposed to being able to communicate what you want to say in a more compassionate manner. And that comes from a lot of reflection. Being a person who is mostly reactive, mostly very emotional, to coming to a space where, yes, somebody might be screaming at me, but let us understand, where is that wound coming from? Where is that unhappiness coming from? A few years ago, I would think that is impossible, because that's what I would do. React if somebody is saying something, or most of the time I would keep quiet and feel bad about it, and then be frustrated and be unhappy with self. So there was a lot of, the reason this is self work is that you're trying to understand what are those things which are stopping you from being your authentic self, right?
Yeah.
So coming back to the Gokai, I think meditating doesn't just mean sitting someplace and meditating on the Gokai. It's being mindful about that aspects of you on an everyday basis, seeing where they happen, when they happen, but to write about them. I have often found answers in my dreams. That's how I work. So I have a journal beside my table where not that I wake up in the middle of the night, but fortunately I remember them. I have a lot of downloads that happen in the night. So that helps. But I think also talking to people whom you trust also helps. It's not something I did very easily, because I would hesitate. I'm like, oh my God, I'm giving them a chance and I'm going to hear a lot. But when people are close to you, they're going to give you genuine answers. So
I think that takes a lot of courage too. I mean, it's one thing to be like mindful and reflective within our own space, which is, like you say, it is a practice. And I love that suggestion you give of journaling. So if you are working with the Gokai and having consideration for where you do recognize your own anger and worry, or even your own gratitude, but writing about it so that you can be reflective to help work through those processes. But I think it's a bold move to ask people very close to us. So, what do you think about how I express myself? Because, I mean, that's very, I think, vulnerable to ask, like, what is it that I am projecting, or what is your interpretation of how I am being? And having that to be another point of reflection. I mean, that's amazing to think of in of itself, Padma. There's another thing that you shared too. About the chakras and holding the anger in your throat and being very aware of why it's held there. And it brings up this question, because people may study different systems and have various practices from different schools of thought. And often there is this kind of debate of sorts, or some people think you can only focus on one tradition. Others think, like I personally can see where they all point to essentially the same things is fine. But having that, I mean, very interestingly, just in your life, like you grew up with understanding and awareness of yoga, pranic work, connection to breath, Ayurveda, all of these things, even the chakra system. And now here you come into the practice of Reiki. Your practicing of that, did it give you any more insightfulness about the other systems you were already familiar with, and vice versa? Did maybe yoga and breath work support your practice of Reiki? How did you see these practices in relationship?
Yeah, another great question. So basically, any spiritual practice, right? The greatness about spiritual practices, and the reason I like them, I'm comfortable with them, is the fact that there are no diktats involved. There are no rules that you have to do this, because ultimately we are all exploring, and where we are reaching is actually finding our true selves. or some people call it spirit, some people call it God. So, but every, I think, spiritual tradition points to the same, it gives the same message as to how can you dig deep into yourself to be able to find that true self, right?
Mhm.
And there will be a lot of work which one needs to do. So even if you came to yoga and breath work, yoga is about tying a person to, to the breath work. Ultimately, with the breath work, the person is being more aware. Yoga is also about awareness of breath, awareness of the spirit. The asanas, or the exercises of the Yoga Sutra, are actually, there is only one if one got deeper into the scriptures, there is only one place where they mention. The other sutras are all about how to, reach a state of spirituality, right, where you go and find the true self. So all these finally are speaking about the same thing, and if one is open to that, and I am not a purist in any sense. In fact, interestingly, my own, I think we were encouraged as kids also, with the way we were brought up by our parents to, um, and I, although I come from a traditional Hindu family, I have had friends from various religions. I have gone to every religious place because there is that beautiful vibration out there. So it goes beyond religion. I think these are diktats which people find comfortable to be aligned to. I don't, but it's also because perhaps of the messages which my own parents gave us. Uh, Growing up was uh, my dad worked with this. He worked for the United Nations, so there was a lot of people from all over the globe who used to come home for dinners, and I have met people from every aspect. And this was growing up, okay, in my teenage. People from places like Indonesia, Germany, Spain, and South Africa. And I remember all of them, and it was such a beautiful culmination of cultures. So there was that anyway. There is never, like, I never mention, or I never let people, I never discuss religion. I mean, in the sense that I don't identify with that.
Right.
And that's a very personal opinion. There's nothing right and wrong there. So for me, it was, I think, very natural to be able to understand spiritual practices which would resonate with me, as opposed to saying, okay, maybe it's not yoga, so I'm not going to do this. So I found Reiki to be the closest to something which I had as an understanding. I know that Japanese Reiki might not speak about the specific chakras as yoga uh, would speak about. But end of the day, it is about the energy meridians. Energy meridians are called chakras in certain traditions, and they all speak about how you align all these together. So for me, they all are maybe different languages or different scripts, but they all come back to the same. It is you are using the Reiki symbols. The first symbol is about finding your true self, going into your kami. That is what it is. And I think even yoga says that. Ayurveda helps you with learning the right, foods to eat that could align you based on your personality. So they are all saying the same, I think.
That is so beautiful. I'm glad that you mentioned this, Padma, again, because you really have. I mean, you've had what an amazing life experience, really, to be exposed to so many different cultures and teachings, because a lot of people, we don't have that opportunity. So I think how fortunate you are to have had that at such an early age. But really, I think it also brings us into that space of like the non-duality and softening the judgment and having more compassion and understanding when we come out of the rigidity of only one way is the right way, which, I don't, I think we go from a stage of seeking and we graduate from seeking into observation. But I think when we're in the seeking stage, a lot of us are just looking for what is right. What is the right thing that is going to help me understand life in a fuller way, or help me understand myself in a fuller way? Whatever it is that has caused you to seek, we often are seeking so much because we want to make sure we got all the information, that we have the most right thing and all of this. But to your point, I think once we start integrating and coming just out of the information and start implementing, then we come into that deep, deep state of observation where those lines of separation do dissolve. And we see how all of these systems really are pointing to the same thing. And it is quite amazing. So I want to ask you about this because, again, there's so much beauty in hands-on healing, and there's so much beauty in a lot of aspects of the practice of Reiki that have been emphasized. But with what you shared, there are deeper layers to it. So I want to ask you about that very specifically. Once you started going into whatever form of practice that helped you start being like, okay, I'm more reflective, I'm journaling, I'm doing all of these things, what then started to come with your relationship to practice and relationship to you? Did you notice any shift? Do you notice any now? Like, what is your relationship to you and your practice that has changed over the years?
I mean, it's a beautiful, my favorite question actually, because there's so much to that. Uh, it is, see, end of the day, I am doing a practice. I have to learn the lessons. Is it changing me? Is it transforming me? What is the shift there? Until I do that, I cannot genuinely speak about it, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
in all honesty, a day for me begins by showing up for myself, right? I'm honoring myself today. Thanks to the practice, there's a lot of and I will speak about that, the creative aspect of it, but it just begins as simple as getting up, being in gratitude for the day. How often have I done that in my life? That is the third precept, yes. But do I, okay, I woke up today. Maybe there were people who didn't. So,
Yeah.
I mean, sounds morbid maybe, but you know what I mean. I'm talking
Yeah.
about the gratefulness of of just existing, right? Just being me, but then having an opportunity to uh, be aware of how you are planning the day, structuring the day, how the ritual of meditation that you begin a day with will help clarify your day. To have those as tools, and for a person like me who needs that kind of organization, because I have a lot of things going on in my head. So I like structuring my day, and that has been the biggest lesson I have learned through Reiki, which is very surprising. It's not a management course, but it is really, I mean, that is also an aspect of it. I need to make a note of that. But to me, that's how it is. I start the day, and there's a meditation, there's an intentionality, there is, the um, energy is flowing where thoughts are flowing. So it's very important to sit in that state of stillness to figure out how do you want the day to be, right? And then that sets the day, and then you also do the self healing. And if there are any conflicts going on in your mind, and especially if one is working, then they might crop up. So it's a good space to be in, to understand, okay, how do I deal with it today, right? With compassion, with understanding for the other person. And those were not the tools I had earlier. It was, like I said, a very reactive life. But now, imagine, even before I go on with my day, I get that chance of 45 minutes to sit in meditation, to be able to call in my guides, to be able to thank them for being a part of my life, and then to be able to create an intentionality. Or so it's like having your own personal coach within yourself, you know. It So that's how it is. But for me, the one of the very transformative changes I've seen within myself is my inner voice, with a lot of frustrations of the past and the regrets. This voice was very hierophant type, in the tarot, the very strict one, to people who might not understand what I'm saying. What are you doing, right? The tone is not, it's like a principal or a headmaster.
Yeah.
From that tone has changed. That inner voice is so soft, so gentle, so understanding.
Wow.
So to have that voice speak to you and say, okay, this is me, right? This is me, this understands me, it understands my past, it understands me today. So I mean, if I had to speak to you about the amount, I think the layers of Reiki and the healing, it provides, there is so much to talk about. We only have this much of time, at least now, but to be in gratitude and to have realized that the voice within me is more encouraging now. It peps me up, and I feel so confident. And uh, the biggest thing that has happened is, I think culturally we come from spaces where, because of the gender, because of traditions, we stop ourselves from doing several things because somewhere there's a definition that you cannot do this.
Right.
And we believe that they are interpretations of others. My biggest learning has been that I do read people's books. I relate to them, I respect them, but then I make it my own. Because everybody's reality, every I think everybody's interpretation of what they understand is only going to I think make sense to them. It's not necessary that I need to make a note of it and have my life also go that way, because my reality shows up in a very different way to me. So that was another I think profound understanding I had. I'm like, how can reality be different for others, when I heard about it? And I was reading, I think, Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi. When I came across this statement, I had to sit for months together to understand. So, now that I'm talking to you, I'm realizing, how did I come to the spiritual path as wanting to know it? I think these were all those signs that came. And so, yeah, so from there I came to Reiki, and I think somewhere I have understood that Reiki is a world of its own, and it is a culmination of everything I have been studying. So be it balancing your chakras, be it having intentionality, be it shadow work or understanding others' triggers. And like you said, triggers are our mirrors, right? So what is that showing me about myself? So, but all this happens only when I show up for myself and say, I need to learn this to better myself, to make myself a better person. So that's where everything begins, and I think everything ends.
Yeah. Oh, Padma, I love so much just the realization of your inner voice changing. I mean, that's huge, especially because, again, it's one of those things I don't think we recognize always how detrimental our inner critic can be, right? Like a lot of us are talking in our heads, we do it all the time, right? But we don't recognize the impact of our self-talk, and because it becomes so like it's patterns. Like we may be used to telling ourselves, oh, you can't do that, oh my god, you're so crazy, or whatever. Like we have these patterns, these habits of telling ourselves certain stories over and over again, and again, not realizing the implication of what it is that we are saying about ourselves, what we may be holding ourselves back from, where we may need some compassion and love for ourselves. So to have come into this work, and with all the methods of reflectiveness that you've shared, for it to make a change to that inner voice, that is huge. That is such a beautiful thing. And I mean, just think about that. Like anyone listening, like if you go from overly criticizing yourself to a space where the criticism starts to dissipate, and then you become more encouraging of you, think of how that in of itself would be so life-changing.
Absolutely. I mean, it has made a lot of impact in my everyday life also. Coming before doing anything, there are a lot of fears, like I said, attached. But this voice is just not gentle. It's not, there to pamper me. It also tells me it's okay, right? You can do this. What is the fear coming from? So it's also a good idea at that time, because you're used to, like when you sit with a precept and you're saying, okay, let me understand where this is coming from. It's also fear. So if I encounter fear, then I'm also sitting and saying, okay, where is this coming from? Is it something which I was a limiting, aspect from my family? Not family exactly. I had a very, I think, very non-limiting of sorts. I mean, there's a lot of freedom in terms of family, but culture does, right? Culture is limiting in terms of your gender. There are so many stereotypes and biases happening, and we do live with those. And sometimes we also convince ourselves that that's how it is. There is a role which a woman plays, and being in the human resources for so long, I've seen those disparities there, right? And that voice is important, because that voice is what will actually make you, it gives you a courage. Yes, you have a choice, right? Your voice, you have a choice, so you have a voice. I don't know if I just I have to think about this. I just came up with this. Okay. So yes, you have a choice, and with your voice you express yourself. And but for so many years, right, we didn't even know that we had a choice. Really? I mean, now when
Yeah.
you sit, really, I have an opinion, or really, I have a choice. So there was so much of ingrained, you know, interpretations of how one should live, and to almost etched in stone, but not.
Yeah.
So which is the good part? You can erase them, but it'll take a lot of practice. But there is freedom on the other side of that,
Mhm.
that nobody can stop one from, if I think something and this is for my highest good, and those are the, you have to go through those levels of, call it a checklist. Okay, I want to do this. Is it for my own good? If I am with a, suppose it's as simple as a Reiki practice, right? If I am doing a self practice, there is an intention for my own highest good, for the highest good of the planet. Those are important. When it's a client, it's the sender and the receiver, right? You're thinking about the intention being for the highest good of that. So when you fill those spaces up and say that I'm doing this for the good, overall good, then it becomes very easy for one to do that. It is that, uh, uh, that you that fear goes away, because you feel that now there is a real goal out there. There are signposts out there. They are helping you reach that space.
Yeah.
So when you
Yeah.
do that, I think it is very freeing. I mean, that has been my personal opinion. I haven't, and coming back to voice, yes, I have done a lot of work, Yolanda, on my throat chakra. I mean, aligning all the chakras, yes, but I knew that there was a block, and to even understand that block took a lot of work, I think,
Yeah.
a lot of
Well, it's
healing.
amazing. I was just thinking, I wrote down, it's interesting that the conversation has pointed a lot to voice, which a lot of us have struggles with for different reasons. So in the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned a bit of, where you may have restricted your voice and you didn't necessarily speak whatever your feelings or thoughts were. You also spoke a bit about going from being reactive to being more responsive, having an awareness that if someone is saying something from their hurt or their wound, that you can be an observation of that and have compassion for, not personalizing it, so to speak, but understanding we all have our wounds. But then even coming to where you are now, what you're sharing about the inner voice and how that relationship has changed. What you have emphasized for me too is that connection to mind. Because I think a lot of times when people think about Reiki and they think about energy work, there is a lot of focus or thought about energy, whatever your connection is to that, but also body. Again, like, helping to alleviate stress and tension and physical pain, or, just a lot around the physicality. But there are so many aspects of the system that point to purifying heart mind and the healing of our heart mind. And I think a lot of what you shared has really emphasized that. Like, so our voice is literally projecting the nature of our mind and what our stories may be, and where our attention is given, and this type of thing. So with that, I have to ask you this before asking you about being an artisan. I have to ask you about that aspect of working with the elements of mind. And I know that you do, because I mean, you're in the alchemy circle. So I know I've been able to, again, thankfully, I'm so thankful to have been a part of your journey. And I learned so much from you too, Padma. And I'm really thankful for meeting you. I wanted to know if you can share a little bit about that, what that has been like for you, exploring aspects of mind and how that comes into this work, and what that has even done for you.
Yeah, I'll actually go back to Reiki and the symbols of Reiki, because,
Mhm.
and I do this as, it's a part of my everyday ritual. And so when I come to a space where I say that I hear my voice and how it has transformed, all that has been a gradual journey. It has started with working with the mind and the body and the emotions, and working with the symbols, working with the energy of the chokure and the seheki, and understanding what those energies speak about in Reiki, and how harmonization of the mind and body is very critical in coming up with even any little decisions in life. And I'm a water sign, so I tend to be very emotional. The analytical part, of course, exists, but I tend to come from a space of emotion as opposed to balancing both. It's not as if I should not be emotional and I have to be only, mind, come from from analyzing things, but it is the marriage of both, and that is very important in actually leading your life on an everyday basis. So for me, it was a revelation when I was learning Reiki, that becomes so important to balance the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And to that extent, I still do a lot of practices. I work with other teachers also, specifically with invoking the goddess energy, because I somehow, while working with myself, felt that that was something which I needed to strengthen within myself, the energy of the divine feminine. So, and that gives courage, right? The going away of the fear, or the melting of fear, happens when there is that courage. And that courage comes when you know that it is there within you, which you can manifest. So to understand these energies, to understand the energies of intuition, and to be able to blend them with the analytical or the practical part of you, and to work with them is what gives a person that balance. It cannot be either or. It's not an either and or game. So I think those kind of practices have helped me seriously in understanding the shadow and the light aspects of me also. Because if there is a goddess that today, and I do this very interestingly on any day when I feel a little shaken or disturbed, I speak to myself. I'm like, okay, what is the energy which you're looking for? Are you in pain? So there is a healing energy that you need. So I invoke the goddess of healing. And by invoking, and this is my understanding, I could be wrong, but this is my experience, invoking is not somebody who is outside of you. There is no goddess outside of you who is coming in front of you and sitting there and giving you blessings. It is this person who is within you. This is that energy which you are invoking, saying that I am an aspect of this energy. And 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 that by itself again gives you so much of confidence in yourself, that all these aspects are you. uh, it's very simple. It's very similar to, I exist like Padma, right? So to my husband I'm a wife, to my mother I'm a daughter, to my nieces I'm an aunt, but I am the same person. So I have various manifestations. I behave differently with different people. There are different energies coming out at that particular time as needed. And that's how this divine feminine is also, based on, so the thing is to understand when I need what. But it's good. So there are meditative practices involved to invoke the goddess of courage, or the invoke the goddess of healing. And there are various this is where I go, I think, deeper into my own scriptures, but not in a very dogmatic or religious way, which was taught. By the way, I ran away from the the religious aspect of of where I come from, only because there were so many diktats involved, and what men can do and what women. But I think, interestingly, with Reiki, with working with you, I have understood that there are always going to be different interpretations. It's just what you pick up from there, and there is always something for everyone, because after all, they are written for people, right, to help them. So yeah, so mind and body, one cannot be without that kind of practice on an everyday basis. I think, what did you call that, space cadet? If you don't do that, you're going to be a space cadet. So, so yeah, that balancing is essential, and the tools are also important, and I follow a lot of your tools in that.
Yeah, and I love that you bring up invoking the goddess energy, because a lot of people do come into this deep curiosity of working with guides, whether it's something that they started with, but a lot of times coming into energy work, and once you start seeking, I mean, there's so much out there, and one of the big topics is guides. I mean, we all know, like, this conversation comes up all over the place, but also working with the divine feminine and goddess energy, and all of this also very prevalent within this realm. But I love that you mention it, because it does highlight how there are, in any tradition really, I mean, if you look at the Hindu gods and goddesses, if you look at the orishas, from just any tradition that you look at, all of these different deities or guides, or however you like to classify them, they all represent different characteristics of our human expression. And so, yeah, I mean, it is beautiful to highlight in the way that you did, Padma, of how these are the energies that remind us of what is part of us, part of our expression, part of our nature, whether they are the expressions that we learn to work through. Some that are more challenging because, but also the beauty of it. I don't know why Kali just came to mind. So some of even the expressions, like when we talk about our work, right? So we talk about, like you said, the aspects of self that reveal more of the true nature, lightness that we may consider, but we can't separate ourselves from also the shadow and what we may think is darker in nature. Yeah. Like, where are also the gifts and the beauty within that? And where do the two really come together? So then we have different deities that we may see in very different light. I did not expect to do this, but it's coming up. You know how it goes. And so I'm going to ask you about two different deities right now. I hope it's okay. But to help people understand even this aspect of self that we may look at as separate, but really there's this synergy there, and this emphasis on understanding kind of like all the dimensions and layers of our expression. But again, where's the beauty in that? So like the goddess Kali is coming to mind again, and a lot of people see the images of her and they're like, ooh, like, oh my God, right? But could you, with what I just said, and then say on the other hand, who came to mind was Lakshmi, right? It's like beautiful and oh, it's so nice. Could you give an example of maybe the interpretations of these two aspects of goddess energy? They're both aspects of the divine feminine, but even visually are presented in very differently, right? But what can we learn in these two different energies that are both very beautiful, though? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
We should have a discussion on this. So basically, like you said, when there is a light aspect, there's also a dark aspect, right? Mm-hmm. If you looked at Lakshmi, right, and when you see her photos, there's a lot of prosperity, money, gold coins falling. And I always, and that was what we were taught. We were like, if you need money in life, you should have Lakshmi's photo. I'm like, okay, I don't need money. I mean, in the sense that who really wants to be. So, but it's not that. It's about abundance. She defines inner abundance. And it's again, who writes that about that, right?
Yeah.
And yeah. So while Lakshmi in her light is about the abundance, the inner abundance, which comes from your health, happiness. It comes from your relationships. And that's when you invoke her, when you feel that you need a certain, abundance is something which can be, I think, defined in several ways. If you, in a lot of, it could be job related, it could be relation related, it could be, again, money, a very materialistic also, but it also could be the inner abundance. It is about it could be the inner learning, or, how are you feeling within yourself, with yourself, your relationship with self. That is also abundance. So that could be something I'm trying to invoke.
Yeah. Right? Okay. So with her, because let's say that a lot of people may associate her with like goodness, so to speak, like, oh, this generosity and blah, blah, blah. What could possibly be the shadow to that?
So then it comes, her shadow would be greed. It would be too much of an attachment to the material aspects, which we try to gather. Feeling a sense of lack as opposed to feeling abundant. Because after all, if you really look at yourself today and I'm sitting in this place and being able to talk to you, I might not have a lot of things which others have, but at least I have this inner abundance. I have this opportunity to be able to, express myself and learn, right? So it's although it's very individual, it is the abundance. It is what, whether you define it as physical, materialistic, or non-materialistic, and And I will be writing a blog on this sometime soon. So we will,
good.
if viewers are interested, I will write deeper. I'll dig deeper into the shadow aspect of it. But that is what it is. It is feeling lack, feeling that I have nothing. Or it could also be about yourself saying that I am nothing or I'm not good enough. So
Yes,
that
I
becomes
love this because
shadow.
you really are pointing out, like, the reason it even came to mind is just to put emphasis to what you shared so beautifully about, when we work with these different energies, recognizing that they are a part of ourselves. So really recognizing that, say, Lakshmi could help to highlight for us
Yeah.
our own relationship with
Yeah. Yes.
abundance in all forms. So I love that. Okay, so Kali, like, is there a way that we could look at the light and the dark, or what this energy may teach us about ourselves?
So Kali, right? And I know that you see skulls, you see a garland of skulls, you see the tongue coming out, and there's blood oozing out, and she has a head of an evil person in her hand. And symbolically, like the tarot, you can look at the images and come up with certain explanations. So when she cuts the head, she's asking you to remove ego from you, because that's where ego stays, in the head. So it is destroying the ego of self, which makes you attached to several things. She also speaks about courage, having the courage to fight. So she kills the person who's evil. He is a bad guy who, in the story, he's the king of, the bad army of people. So she to rid the humanity of all the evils, she cuts his head and kills him. So that is the story. That's a little story, which, if one went into it, but she's basically saying that there is a darkness, there is shadow and light in all of us. There is that evil, there is that devil, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's your choice whether you want to. So she's ending that those the evils which are there in this world. So that's what she's signifying. She signifies the courage, because she's standing out there with anger in her. That is the shadow aspect of her, anger. But basically her light side is about the courage, to have the courage and within yourself to understand what is the duplicity which you have, and which you need to figure out, and maybe somewhere transform, transmute. And so there's a lot of healing involved there also, if you look at Kali.
Yeah.
So she does define courage. So when one is feeling very timid, or wanting to do something which is filled with fear, she's the goddess you would invoke. But
This
yeah.
is amazing. And now I'm like, gosh, so maybe if you will, like, one day come back and we'll have a whole conversation about this, because I think, again, it clarifies and helps a lot of people understand why some people work with different energies and their guides, but more importantly, how it can really, like all things that you've shared, point back to having a deeper awareness about you and what your relationship is to these different aspects of our human experience. So in there, you mentioned something, but it made me I wanted to make sure to ask, this is what I'm going to say. I wanted to let everyone know that you do have a website called earthlotusreiki.com, and that will be down in the show description. Is that where we can also find the blogs as you write them?
Yes, I have just started the blogs, because I'm also working, but I don't have many of them, but I just have placeholders for them. But I will eventually, but yes, to answer your question, my blogs will be there.
Okay, so earthlotusreiki.com. And just so you know, the link for her website will be down in the show description. But I wanted to ask you about your creative nature, because you create so many beautiful things. You make these beautiful soaps and candles. And last year I was able to have a few, which I thank you so much. They're beautiful. And I wanted to ask you how that started, you creating these beautiful elements, and a lot of them are lotus shaped, by the way, but also how that comes into your practice. Like, what does this creation of your candles and soaps, how does that feed into your practice as well?
That also has been a very transformative journey. I started it when I came to the US a few years back. Again, that also comes from the the idea of, again, I'll come back to growing up, and using natural remedies, right? I mean, our grandparents always used to have some concoction for your acne or something, right? So there was a lot of involvement of ingredients from the kitchen to make self-care products. And I used to be extremely fascinated to use, moringa or neem and all those. Coconut, of course, has been a part of life, I think. So when I came to the US, I think that dream always stayed with me, that someday I would create some self-care products which would have the essence of what I learned growing up. Because somewhere that memory, it takes you back to those happy childhood days. Be it the scents or the summer, the jasmine would remind me of us. An Indian summer wedding, or all those things, and gathering of friends and family. So I think it began as my need to feel connected to home, because I was here and I think my heart was there.
Yeah.
so so that's how I started. I started, and I have a lot of knowledge about how to use, what ingredients or raw materials to use for a certain skin, type of skin, or whatever someone is dealing with. So, but I have always liked the design aspect of anything. And there is meditation involved there also. Because it basically, to make, say, I think, let me see, maybe yes, 8 to 12 bars of soap. It will take me 4 hours of working with certain raw materials, understanding there's a lot of calculation involved, the room temperature in which I work. So there's a lot of science involved there also. Uh, so to spend those many hours and then come up with something smelling so beautiful was pretty exciting to me, and that's how I started it. Candles, yes, candles was, I think, with soaps, I loved the fact that I could control the designs which I wanted, and create my own. And I used to, by default, get these ideas in the middle of the night. And but then with the work I started, I think again that I kept doing it and I liked what I did, but I don't know how much of intentionality I had, or would I, say, okay, is there something else I can do? Or it was the limiting factor of fear. Like, if there are two ingredients that don't go together, it's because somebody has written about it. Oh, these two smells, they don't get along. But I'm like, okay, again, that is somebody else's opinion, right? So a few years back, I was like, okay, I don't even want to try this, because who wants to spoil a bar of soap? But now with this work, I'm like, no, I decide. If it has come in my dream, or if intuition is telling me that this is a good idea, I'm going to do it. And I'm peaceful with the fact that maybe I need to throw something away into the trash can. So see, there are two things here. There's a confidence, there's an inner confidence. There is creativity that is coming from the sacral. There is intuition that is coming from the third eye chakra. So there is that chakra work is happening. There's chakra mirroring happening there, and nothing can go wrong, because you have that intention that you're honoring yourself again and your creativity. So that is the transformation that has happened in my work now. And interestingly, it has also brought a lot of structure into my life. My soap room is more clean now. I mean, after I finish the work, I mean, I'm just joking, but really there is a lot of structure. I know, okay, these are the things, they need to be here. I'll finish this, then I'm going to clean it. And then even the creations are beautiful. I feel like I see a different, I can see a personality in the work I do now, which was, I think, just budding at one time. So I think intuition plays a large role right now in my work. And with candles, I'm loving to do them, because I'm able to share that with our alchemy group. Meditation candles, if I could, and infusing them with Reiki energies. I love doing that practice of, filling them up with Reiki. I do meditations. I infuse them with that energy, and I think that really works. So I do love making candles now. So
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
what
they're beautiful. Your work is absolutely beautiful. And I saw some of the newer ones that have like the yin yang. And you have, I mean, they're gorgeous. So again, if you are interested in getting your own beautiful meditative candles that were made with so much intention. You can get that on the website too, right? Yes,
Yes.
earthlotusreiki.com. So I have to ask you one more thing, Padma. I know we've gone a little over, and thank you for having this conversation with us. Like I could talk to you all day. Because there's so many things I wanted to ask you about. But I have asked the alchemist all this one question.
Mhm.
And so I have to make sure to ask you as well. Who is your practice for?
Wow. Again, yeah. See, I would say that it begins with me. The
Yeah.
practice does begin with me, and if I'm doing a self practice, yes, it is me. I'm figuring out what has to change in me. But then there's an aspect of when I'm working with someone else, and that's why there is another layer to it. Then there is another person, right? There's a sender, and then there is a receiver. But then you are also dissolving the illusion of separation, right, between me and that person. So finally, it is about whatever I'm doing for myself is a small step towards doing something for the planet. Sounds big, but yes, that is how it is. If you can change, something about yourself and be able to bring that healing aspect into the other person, then that interconnectedness is always going to be there. So the work, the practice is for me. By extension, it is for everyone else who comes in my space, all those people who honor me with wanting healing.
Yeah, no, that's so beautiful. I mean, beautifully said. I can't even ask you anything else about that. That said it all, Padma. And I have to ask you this too, because in some of the conversations with people, I was able to learn like how they found, the alchemy circle and coming into this leg of work. And I know you mentioned earlier that when you were practicing, you came across Reiki Radio. But what encouraged you to come into the group, into the circle? And then what is that like for you, even working with community in that sense? I know that you do a lot on your own, which I think everyone should do, but then what is that element like working with other people?
Yeah, and yeah, I'll go back to how I came to the alchemy circle. I just came intuitively. I just signed up, and sometimes there are things that you do, and somewhere in the back of your mind, without any empirical data, you know that this is the thing to do. I think that's the definition of intuition. I just knew that I wanted to, and that was the first time, by the way, I was on Patreon. It's not as if I kind of knew about it, but I didn't know what were the services or what did that platform do. But I just did, and I showed up.
Yeah.
Pat on the back for that for myself. And then I got connected with you, with the circle, and all those inspiring true stories, which I hear, and with the tools that you provide us. There cannot be anything better than this. I mean, I could not have asked for a better group of people who teach me every day. And we do connect, right? We do connect on the side. We've done book clubs, we do Reiki shares. And yeah, we do intentionalities. We also sometimes, I think, get together if someone is available, just to understand what are the and this is what I like, what are the challenges which we personally come across when we are working with our clients. So how beautiful is it that it's a space of sharing vulnerabilities. There is no competition here. Nobody, we are all springboards to each other, if that is a word to use. And we learn every day. I mean, real time case studies, right? I mean, it couldn't get better than this. So that is what this circle, this is a lifeline to me. And I think in the decisions I've made in life, this whatever brought me here, I'm just so grateful for being a part of this beautiful group of people and you. Yes.
Oh, Padma, I love, it's funny. I was just thinking of how I remember you first came, you seemed so shy, and now you're just like, whoo, like you share so beautifully with the group. But I forgot about that part. No one mentioned that, but that is true. You all have book clubs that, I mean, so many meditation circles, Reiki circles. Yeah, I mean, it's really beautiful, even the way where certain people may need support and everyone will rally around and offer that. That's a really beautiful thing. But I want to thank you personally for one, coming to share your story and insights here on the podcast, because I'm sure it will inspire so many other practitioners. I have to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you have contributed and shared within the Alchemy Circle, because again, truly, I learned from all of you as well. And it's just it's a beautiful space. So I want to make sure that people know how to get in contact with you. We mentioned earthlotusreiki.com, but social media, are you on social media as well?
I've just come on to Instagram, and it's
Okay.
the same handle. It's Earth Lotus Reiki. For specific, yeah, from there, I think that's what I will be using. So there are
Okay.
just these two for now.
Yes.
And
So Earth Lotus Reiki is the
yes,
perfect way. Okay.
yeah, in
So
my website.
everyone
So,
listening, just go down in the show description and I'll have all the links there for you to connect with Padma, continue the conversation with her and see her beautiful offerings. I wanted to ask you that too. We mentioned your soaps and candles, but are you doing sessions with people at this time? Can people book with you for remote sessions?
yes, I am. I'm actually, and I am doing that, and I work with with just a group of people. I only because there are these practices are so personal to people. I spend time other tools for empowering people and journal prompts. So I spend a lot of time doing that. So yes, I am absolutely offering Reiki services, remote Reiki for now. Special, I think there are specifics, and it's there on my offerings page also. And like just like the way spending time on chakras has helped me understand my the light and shadow aspects. I realized that that would be a good tool to also uh, you know um, uh, go deeper into. So I have those specific chakra practicing tools also. I learned
Yes.
them from you. Thank you so much.
Oh,
And
you're
I have
welcome.
created my own. So yeah, so those are also there. So yes,
You know,
I do feel that all of them. Yeah.
I have to thank you for that too, Padma, just as a side note, because I know that you have a very more traditional understanding of, can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, this earbud sometimes but a traditional understanding of the chakra system. And I have to say that for people listening as well, one of the beautiful things I love about the group is everyone has very different backgrounds and we all are open to share whatever our understanding is. And you have contributed a lot from, what it is that you learned and understand, but you also had such an openness to my chakra mirroring. And so that's again like the beauty, that one of those things I love about you so much is you are so open to just everything. And just again, the way that you process things and the way that you then reinterpret even a lot for us and share what your points of view are have just been absolutely amazing. But it's been fun playing in that space with you, I would say, especially with the chakra mirroring. So thank you for that, my love.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
This, this
Um, hmm?
this was a great experience to be able to share so much. I mean, I'm finding a lot of aspects of me also while talking. So yes, thank
No, I'm sure like after this, your mind is gonna go, you're like, Yolanda, you know what else I thought of?
you.
And that's the thing too, on the other side of this, I really truly, because there were so many things we didn't get to talk about, I do want to invite you back if you are open to it, having another conversation where we can explore some more. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Please, please, please make sure you connect with Padma to see how wonderful she is. Go to earthlotusreiki.com. And that's it for the podcast. But I will see you, my love, very, very soon.
Thank you
Thank you
so
for
much.
coming today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Bye.
Bye.